When they asked me to introduce our mission speaker this morning, I was a little bit at a loss of what I should tell you about her, because as of today, I've known her for 22 years, 10 months, and 21 days. There's a lot of things I could tell you about her. But I thought of two important things I wanted you to know about Carolyn. And the first off is how much she loves cows and how much she loves farming. Since she was just a kid, she's been able to tell you the ancestry of just about any cow in our herd off the top of her head. We call her the cow computer. And so I think that's what caused her to go to college at the University of River Falls and graduate last May with a degree in dairy science and a minor in chemistry. The second thing I want you to know about Carolyn is that she cares deeply and loves people. An instance I think of is when I had a broken leg the winter I was 3, she wore out the knees out of every last pair of pants she owned, crawling around the floor, playing with me and keeping me entertained. And, but it's not just people she knows well that Carolyn cares about. She cares deeply about missionaries and the lost. And so I want to welcome her up today to tell you guys a little bit about her short-term mission trip to Ecuador this past winter.
Okay, so this is just an example of some of the gorgeous mountains that became normal. You spend 2 months somewhere and all of a sudden that's just what you get used to. But I couldn't quite get over it, growing up in Minnesota. I still couldn't quite get over how beautiful it was. So I took a lot of pictures of mountains. Just switch it, yeah. So a little bit of background on Ecuador. They gained independence from Spain in 1822. So they do have that Spanish conquistador history, and you definitely see that in Cuenca with the cobblestone streets, with the beautiful cathedral that you'll see a picture of soon. They have a population of over 15 million. It is largely Catholic. You definitely see many, many beautiful Catholic churches, but there is some evangelical as well. The church I worked with, Paz de Dios, is one of 3 Lutheran churches in Cuenca. So not a lot of Lutheran, but there are some evangelicals. The government is a republic, but voting is mandatory. And based on my assessment, the current president is fairly socialistic. But I think they've seen growth and some good things happening in Ecuador. I feel like it's a lot more stable than some of the countries in South America. The economy is heavily based on petroleum. So as we see our Bakken Ridge closing, it's also been very difficult for Ecuador, for Venezuela, some of those countries that rely very heavily, over half their exports, coming from petroleum. They also have a lot of bananas. Those are in the coast region. Cut flowers. They have this climate that's where I was at. They call it kind of eternal spring. And they have just greenhouses wrapped around the mountains because there's so little flat ground. These greenhouses going down the slope. And so they can grow lots of flowers and fruits and vegetables. And chocolate, of course. What I found interesting was that it cost like $6 to buy a bag of chocolate chips that were Hershey's brand, because the chocolate probably is grown in Ecuador, shipped to the States, made into chocolate, and shipped back. So you could also buy Ecuadorian chocolate. That was a little more reasonable. And the currency was US dollars since 2000, so I didn't have to change any money. They switched it over from the sucre, which was struggling, and they switched to the US dollar. If we switch to the next one. So the culture, in a lot of ways, Ecuador is, quite similar to us. Most of the people dress like we do, but there are certain people more from the country areas who still wear the traditional clothing. And there are several different traditional groups, and they have different dress. The ones I saw most in Cuenca had this kind of a mid-length skirt, and they would wear these hats. And so you would see quite a few people who still wore the traditional dress, although in the city it was more modernized. Switch. So this is the cathedral, and like I say, it's right in the center of Cuenca. The whole city, which is, Cuenca is 500,000, is built around, kind of around this cathedral. It's a focal point. It's huge, it's magnificent, but I felt it was a little sad too. You just go inside and it didn't feel like God was there, but and so that's one of the reasons why you want to go and share with people, because they have religion, but they don't have Jesus for many of them. So, as Annette said, I like cows. I have quite a few cow pictures. And my first day in Cuenca, I got up, went across the street from the Romeros. This is the street the Romeros live on. I'll get to them in a minute. And there were 2 cows. I'd wondered how far I was going to have to get to find cows, and I didn't have to go too far. So these are tethered right in the city of Cuenca. We'll switch. So more culture, like I say, food. These are guinea pigs being roasted over an open fire on sticks. I was there for 2 months and I never got to try them because they're a delicacy. They're like $20 to $30 to buy a prepared guinea pig in the streets, and with the wages they have, that's quite expensive. So I never actually tried guinea pig, and I'm sort of sad because I would have liked to said I tried it, but I'm not just craving it either. Probably. And then on the right here is an example of the open-air markets they had. Huge markets with fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, just all of it. And some of it indoors as well, but just lots of fruits, fresh vegetables, all available. And you can bring your little pouch of money and you go and you barter with, or you don't barter, but you argue with them a little bit about what to pay. Here's a little bit more food. The dish on the left I did eat. I ate that out in a country home. The fish is called bagre, and it was described to me as a cross between bullhead and something else I can't remember. And it's like a potato soup. And on the right is hornado. It's a type of pork where they bake the whole pork in an oven. And so you see these pigs sitting around, and they're just cutting stuff off of them. And apparently it's really good. That was another thing I didn't actually try. Switch. I got to experience about half a day of carnival. A carnival is a big celebration in Ecuador. And as you can see on this guy, this white stuff, that's like shaving cream. They have a lot of fun with spraying each other with foam. So I got spattered with foam when we went to just like a carnival celebration, and there was dancing and like the traditional dancing. As you can see, once again, the traditional outfits. And then people spraying foam everywhere. But I was lucky because I left before they started throwing water, which apparently is also very traditional. Water balloons, water buckets, people standing on the roof pouring water down on cars going by. So it can get a little crazy, although I've heard it's calmed down in recent years. But I actually went on a trip during that time, so I escaped most of it. So these were my hosts. I had several hosts, but Giovanni, Miriam, Jeremy, and Pablo were my primary hosts. Many of you have met them as they lived on our farm for 3 months in the summer of 2014. So they were here in the U.S. working with the Hispanic community. So with them living on our farm, I got to know them pretty well. They didn't know English very well. I didn't know Spanish very well when they were here. And so we both had to use as much as we could and use hand signs, and we got pretty good at it. And so I lived with them, and I did get pretty good at communicating with them. They knew what I knew, and I kind of knew what they knew, and we did pretty well. So Giovanni, since he's been back in Ecuador, he preaches occasionally. He taught a class at the Aletheia Bible School. He helps out with confirmation, with outreach. He just has a real heart for reaching out to people. And now he's a math professor at the university. That is a temporary position. And Miriam, she stays busy homeschooling the boys and taking care of the home. And I feel like there's a lot involved with that too, with buying your produce fresh, and you need to make sure it's all sanitized and washed. And they have washing machines, but they don't have dryers. You got to get all the laundry out. And so it is a fair amount of work just taking care of a home, which it is here too, I know, but there's some extra challenges. And so as you think about the Romeros, just pray for wisdom for their future, because I do have a strong desire to do missions, to serve the Lord, and they just want to make sure that they follow His leading into where they go and what they do. So Claudia, she was a great friend of the Romeros, and she's also a teacher at the Bilingue School. It's a bilingual Lutheran school with about 1,500 students, and it sits right next to the church Paz de Dios. She's a teacher there, and she was my host as well. When the Romeros were gone for 10 days, I went and I lived with Claudia. And here, this is our trip we took during Carnival, so we went together on that trip. So she's the director of chapel. And one thing to note, I feel like the Bilingue is struggling a little bit with the direction they should be taking. There's a division. Some want it to be evangelical outreach focused. Some are more just focused on the academics. And I think you see that in the fact that each of the children only has chapel once a month. So there's chapel every week, but they rotate the groups through. So I think that that's on the heart of Claudia and other teachers with a real evangelical focus. They would love to see chapel more often, or just be able to reach out to these kids, many of which are not Lutheran, are not evangelical, and reach out to them with the gospel. So she's the director of chapel, and a group of young people help her out, and I got to be one of those young people. One of the things I got to do was help with the puppet skits, and they gave me the part of the devil. I didn't have to say too much, which was good. I just had to sound scary, and that was fun. So that was one way I got to help out, was just with the chapel services, and also trying to help with the singing. And she also teaches Bible, so I got to help her with those Bible classes. In fact, twice I unexpectedly got left with the entire class, which was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I prayed to the Lord, and He really did help me reach out to the kids. The kids stayed under control. They didn't just laugh at my bad Spanish. And they helped me share the story. It was David and Goliath. It's one you can act out pretty easily. And it's one that typically they know fairly well. And so it ended up being a good experience, but I was afraid it was going to be a disaster. Another class that Claudia teaches is manualidades, which is a Spanish word, and we don't exactly have them. It's kind of handcrafts. We did embroidery and some basically fancy, embroidery stitches, ribbon, flowers, things like that. And so I got to relearn and learn some of those things, helping with the young ladies who were learning that. So prayer requests, just revival in the Bilingue, a return to a focus on being an evangelical outreach. As I said, they are the only Lutheran school, maybe I didn't say that, the only Lutheran school in Ecuador, I believe. And so they have a real window, and people want to come there with it being bilingual. And so they get kids who really aren't interested in the evangelical side of things, but they're there, and you've got a captive audience. And another thing, Claudia would love to visit the U.S., but she's struggling to get her visa to go through. So I would like her to come. I'd like to see her. And so if you could be in prayer that, the right people could have a change of heart and let her visa go through. My third hosts were the Pillman family. Many of you are familiar with them, I'm sure. So I would go to the Pillman's house about 3 days a week, and my main duties were helping with these little guys. They obviously keep them pretty busy. I have another slide here. Justo, he works with discipleship, especially with the young men. He teaches at the Aletheia Bible School, which we'll get to in a minute. And he helps with the young adult group, the college age group. He helps with the youth, and he helps with a young married couples group that meets at the church. So he's got a lot of little irons in the fire. And so I got to help him with a couple things, which we'll get to in a minute. Trisha, she teaches piano lessons. She helps Justo co-lead the young couples Bible study. But the lion's share of her time is spent taking care of the kids in the home. So prayer requests, they do have requests posted on the website you guys can see, but just daily strength. They had a lot of sickness when I was there. The kids were sick, Hannah was teething, and they just weren't getting many hours of sleep. It just gets to be day after day, you get tired. And so daily strength for them and encouragement in the things that they're doing. And here are the little guys. So Hannah and Nathaniel, I spent lots of time with them, blowing bubbles, playing with Play-Doh, going to the park, and that's their bathtub. They love water. That day, I told them they could put 1 foot in the water if they wanted. I didn't want them climbing entirely in. And then the baby, Joshua. I hadn't had a lot of interaction with little kids for a long time, so I was a little concerned, but we got along pretty well. And I actually got Joshua to go to sleep sometimes, which usually babies just cry when I hold them, so that was encouraging. Another thing, this is Pablo and Paulina, and they were some of the families trying to homeschool, and so I would go out there, we would do English lessons. And so once a week I'd go out to their house and we would do English lessons, and their mother always made some kind of treat for us. This is flan, and so got to enjoy that as well, get to know them a little bit better. They were very energetic young children, and I hope that they picked up some English from me, and I picked up a little bit of Spanish too as we went along. Another class that I helped teach, and I didn't know I was going to be teaching this when I went to Ecuador, was cooking class. And I like to cook, I like to bake, but it's just different when you're at 8,000 feet. And it's also different when your ingredients aren't the same. And so I would go to the Pillmans, I'd get online, I'd try to find a recipe that we could do. And then we'd come out there and I'd try to explain, and I'd mess up the word for knives and spoons, but we got it made. And I learned the word for oven, and you spend time and you build little relationships, and that we made was coffee cake, and it actually rose compared to the banana bread that we made. So that was good. So this is the bilingue, and I could have moved that back perhaps. This is the group of young people who helped with chapel. So, and that's Claudia again. So afterwards, we would oftentimes stop and we'd have a treat. We'd have a little break. Sometimes I would eat up to 5 times a day. So we'd have breakfast, and then we'd have recreo, our break, then we'd have lunch, and then we'd have coffee time, and then we'd have supper. So sometimes I would eat 5 times a day. And here's the bilingue. All the students in Ecuador wear uniforms. So these are their casual uniforms. And then, I don't know if you can see, this little girl's in a skirt. So they had sweaters and skirts, or they had their little workout pants when they were having Phi-Ed that day. And I just thought it was great that they had a tree with ladders permanently attached for the kids to climb. And then this is some more of their buildings there at the school, their recreation areas. Switching over to the Bible school is a college-age school of the Bible. They had 6 students when I was there. One was actually from the States, Tony. He went down there, and brave soul, he didn't even know that much Spanish. And I got to hang out with these people, and it was just really, really a lot of fun. And they were also an encouragement to me. We'll switch to the next one here. Here's a picture of the school where they lived. They're renting this house. And 2 of the students are married, and so they had a room by themselves. And the other girls were upstairs, and the boys lived over here. And this is the rabbit hutch. And I have a bigger picture too, but they had over to the side, there was a huge garden up here. There was the burrow. There were 2 sheep. There was a little scrawny pig. And there were the guinea pigs over on the side. So they had quite a few animals. Most of these students had lived in the cities their whole lives, and so they were trying to teach them some life skills. I think I have that on my slide coming up. Some life skills, as well as the things that we would typically do at our Bible school, such as Bible classes. So the second point, evangelism, that was when I actually first met the Bible school students. I came into Ecuador on a Wednesday, and the following Wednesday, Giovanni was leading the Bible school students on a citywide outreach. And I don't know about you guys, but evangelism scares me. And just listening to Wendy talk about, do you love me? Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Like, so often for me, it's like, do I really love these people? Do I really care about their souls? And so the day I was supposed to go evangelizing, I got on the bus with Giovanni, and Giovanni didn't have a car, so we had to take the bus a lot. And so we were going out to the Bible school, and I felt sicker and sicker and sicker because, as I found out, I had parasites. So I was not feeling well, and I thought, this is not gonna work, can't trot around the city all day feeling like this. And the other thing was, we were going the wrong way, we're going away from home. And so Giovanni thought, well, if I really couldn't go, I'd have to go back home all by myself because he's leading this class, and that didn't sound like fun either. But I got out to the Bible school, and we met the students, and walked around in the fresh air a little bit, and I started to feel better. And so we were on the bus, and on the bus, the kids started right in. They got up, they shared Bible verses, they shared their testimonies on the public bus. And all of a sudden, I wanted to be part of it. I admired their faith and their courage, and I wanted to be part of it. And I was feeling better, and so I thought, well, I'll go part of the day at least. We'll just start out. And I ended up going the whole day. I got to be with Andres and Veronica, who, when they talked to one of their former someone they knew from the university, and that man was the one man who accepted Christ that day. And I got to be there. And so thank the Lord that I started feeling better, and thank the Lord for the encouragement of other believers building up our faith. Oops, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Back up again. So another thing that the Bible school students did was they had Thursday chapel for the homeschool students. So they'd go down to the church, and the church and the Bible school were not very close, but they'd get down to the church on Thursdays, and they'd lead a chapel for the homeschool students. They also led an entire week of like vacation Bible school for the young people. And then, as I mentioned, the life skills. This is their amazing garden. Because Ecuador never freezes, you can grow great gardens. So I got to help. That was what I would help do sometimes. I went out there a couple of times with Polivio, who was their agricultural teacher, and I helped thin the carrots, pick avas. We picked a 5-gallon pail of avas, which are sort of like lima beans. You have to shell them anyway, because then we had to go shell them. And so they just have these great gardens. And one of the things that was just really fun was just to hang out with other young people when I was out with the Bible school. They invited me out there one day for Capture the Flag. So we went way up there, and the air is already thin, and then you go higher. And then you try to run. But it was pretty uneven. I'm pretty sure any physical therapist would just be cringing, waiting for someone's knee to blow. But it was a lot of fun. We played Capture the Flag and just had an enjoyable time, and a bonfire and a movie. And so it was just fun to make friends on the other side of the hemisphere, or in a different hemisphere. And that's a view from a little bit higher up. That's the school again, and that's just the view around it. And that's their graduating class. And just for the Bible school, I wasn't sure. I was looking to see what updates I could find as far as prayer requests. I couldn't find a lot, so I would just say pray for students, because looking on their Facebook page, I didn't see pictures of new students, so I'm not sure if they had an incoming class this year or not. So that would be my suggestion. Pray for students to come to their Bible school. All right, so another real blessing that I had was the ability to visit the Nate Saint Mission House. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Elizabeth Elliot. I grew up listening to her on the radio and hearing the stories about the 5 men who were missionaries to the Auca Indians, and then they were speared to death, and then Elizabeth Elliot and Nate Saint's sister went in and were missionaries. And so I grew up hearing that, and so when I went to Ecuador, I thought, I've got to go. I've got to try to get there. So this verse here, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. So the part about the Lord himself goes before you, that's what really jumped out to me. Because Claudia and I, we went to this town looking for the Nate Saint Mission House. We didn't know where it was. And we ran into a missionary doctor who happened to know Claudia's sister, who was a doctor, who I'd gone to Bible school with in the States. And that lady had the keys to this beautiful long bridge to get you into the mission. She had the keys, and so I have a picture of her unlocking the door. I had to get a picture of that. And we can switch to the next one here. Okay. And so then we got a tour of the mission, and then Claudia, the name of the doctor was also Claudia, that's confusing. But she told us that this house is only open by tours. They've got a nice museum, but it's by appointment only. And as you can see here, Monday through Saturday, 8:30 to 5:30, and we were there on Sunday with no appointment. So we were concerned we wouldn't be able to get in, but we just happened to come when they were having a tour. And so there was another door unlocked. And so it was just, I felt so blessed and so reaffirmed that God was with me, he'd gone ahead of me, and blessed me in that way. So adjustments. I was reading a little bit in a book about Amy Carmichael, and it was talking about how when she was a missionary, the mission boards didn't usually like her support letters because they were too negative. She told about all the bad stuff going on. And so, but her thought was, we've got all of eternity, and I think if you read your Lutheran Ambassador, this is her quote, we have all of eternity to talk about the successes. We only have this life to reach out to people. And so she thought, how are people going to know to pray for the problems unless I tell them about the problems? So I had a wonderful trip. I think that's evident. But there were adjustments and there were difficulties that had to be dealt with. First of all was the language. They speak a lot of Spanish. I speak a little Spanish, no. I didn't speak a lot of Spanish when I got there. Sometimes I felt locked in, kind of felt stupid, like, I don't know what's going on, don't know what you're talking about, because I don't understand you. But as I did have somewhat of a foundation in Spanish, and as I grew in that, it was just exhilarating to get done with the day and think, I learned all these things about that person. We talked about all these things, and we did it in Spanish. So I was able to make friends, but, the first month was hard. And I'm glad I was there for 2 months, because the first month was a challenge. The food was good in a lot of ways, but I got sick a lot. And one day Giovanni was talking to me, I was sick again, and he said, "Are you scared?" I said, "No," and I had to dig out my dictionary, which I kept with me often, almost all the time, or close by. And I looked up the word, I'm like, no, I'm frustrated. I didn't come here to be sick. I don't like being sick and weak. I've always wanted to be strong, and I've always wanted to be stronger than the problems. And I wanted to be able to help, and here I am sick. And so once again, what Wendy was saying, when life kind of knocks you down a little bit, when things aren't going the way you wanted, the way you planned, God does that sometimes, but he is faithful in it. I wouldn't have chosen it, but I think God uses it. So culture, lots of things were similar, and yet I started to think back and there were a lot of things that were a little bit different too. The greetings, they are much more conscientious about greeting. If you'd have walked into this room, it's like, go down the pew, greet everybody. They just greet people, and they greet a little bit different than we do. They usually give a hug, and they kind of do a little cheek bump, and they make a little kind of a kiss sound, which I didn't quite get that figured out. Actually, I didn't really try, but but I figured out hugging. I could give hugs, so that was good. I was homesick. I didn't expect to be nearly as homesick as I was, especially the first month, once again, when I couldn't communicate very well. I didn't feel good, and everything was different. I just wanted to be home, hot shower, which I talked about water down below. The place I had a little electric heater for the shower, which helps, takes the edge off it, but it's not quite as good as a nice steamy hot shower. Transportation, the Romeros didn't have a car. I got to learn the bus system. I got pretty good at getting on and off. taxis. I'd never ridden in a taxi, and before I was left, I actually rode solo in a taxi a couple times. I went to a lot of houses. There was one week I was in Claudia's house on Tuesday, I was in Pillman's house on Wednesday, I was in a different house on Thursday, so you're living out of a bag, you're making a lot of changes. And I counted up, I think I slept 7 different places in 2 months. And the first few weeks, I wasn't sleeping well, so just challenges and adjustments that have to be made. But there were so many blessings. I felt like you're supposed to be kind of helping them, and you feel like they're blessing you way more than you can ever bless them back. I got to travel, see a lot of new things. I made friends. I went on adventures, and while I have so much more to learn, there were lessons for my faith too that were there in Ecuador. And here's a picture of just the hospitality, going to see the Pacific Ocean for the first time with the Romeros and Claudia. I love Pablo's pose there. We can switch. Traveling, this was the Oriente, the jungle area with just beautiful waterfalls, and then getting to visit the Shell mission there. Friendships, being out in the city with some of the young people. That's out at one of the farms. I visited 2 farms. I loved it, but yeah, that was an adventure getting out there, but I don't have time to tell that right this minute. And so just kind of a review, praise for safety, for a great trip, and for God's faithfulness. And just to be thinking about the Romeros, the Pillmans, Claudia, the Bilingüe, the Aletheia Bible School. And I didn't even put Paz de Dios, the church, on there, but for them too. And I know I'm out of time, so if there's any quick questions.